haunted aisles. It was a quiet evening when I decided to grab a few things from the supermarket before heading home. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows down the narrow aisles. As I walked past the shelves, I noticed products rearranged in chaotic disarray. Strange, I thought, but I brushed it off as the work of careless shoppers. I reached for a box of cereal when I heard a faint whisper, like a sigh, coming from behind me. I turned around only to find the aisle empty. My heart raced, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. That's when I saw it, a figure, barely visible, standing at the end of the aisle. I blinked, and it was gone. Nervously, I continued my shopping, my footsteps echoing loudly in the almost empty store. But every now and then, I felt a chilling breeze brush past me, even though the air conditioning seemed to be working fine. I quickened my pace, my eyes darting around, and that's when I heard the sound of footsteps echoing mine, matching my every move. Panic set in as I realized I was not alone. I abandoned my cart and hurried toward the exit. The flickering lights now seemed to flash in patterns, illuminating a figure in each aisle I passed. It was as if the spirits of the past shoppers were trapped, wandering the supermarket eternally. With a pounding heart, I burst through the exit, vowing never to return to that unsettling place. The cursed checkout. The supermarket had always been a mundane place for me, until that fateful day. I stood in the checkout line, the conveyor belt inching my groceries closer to the cashier. The cashier herself seemed oddly distant. Her eyes glazed over as if in a trance. I tried to make conversation, but she didn't respond. As my items moved closer to her, I noticed her hands were trembling. She scanned each item with meticulous slowness, and with every beep of the scanner, the lights above us flickered. The bagger beside her had a nervous smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. I glanced around and realized that the other customers were just as tense, their gazes fixed on the front of the store. When it was finally my turn to pay, the cashier looked up at me, her eyes now filled with a haunting desperation. She whispered, "Beware the last item." Confused, I looked down at the items on the belt. The last one was a plain, unmarked jar of pickles. I chuckled nervously, thinking it was some kind of bizarre joke, but as she scanned the jar, the entire supermarket seemed to shudder. The lights went out, plunging the store into darkness. Panic spread through the customers, and I could hear faint, ghostly whispers all around me. When the lights flickered back on, the cashier and bagger were gone. The jar of pickles lay on the now empty conveyor belt. Trembling, I fled the cursed checkout, leaving my groceries behind. I never found out what happened to the employees or why that jar of pickles triggered such an eerie event, but I'll never forget the feeling of dread that overcame me in that supermarket. The frozen food phantoms. It was a stormy night when I decided to grab some frozen dinners from the supermarket. The rain drummed on the roof as I entered the store, the chill of the wet air seeping into my bones. I headed straight for the frozen food section, the humming of the freezers a comforting background noise. As I browsed the frost-covered shelves, I noticed a figure out of the corner of my eye. A woman, her skin pale as ice, stood by the frozen vegetables. Her gaze was fixed on the bags of peas, and she seemed to be weeping softly. I hesitated, wondering if she needed help, but something about her sent shivers down my spine. I moved to a different aisle, trying to shake off the unease. But as I turned the corner, I found myself back in the frozen food section. Confused, I tried again, only to end up facing the same weeping woman. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped in a chilling loop. I glanced around and saw more figures, their forms faint and misty, browsing the frozen aisles as if reliving a memory. They paid no attention to me, lost in their own spectral world. Desperation growing, I made a run for the exit, but the automatic doors refused to budge. As I stood there, surrounded by the frozen food phantoms, a bone-chilling voice whispered in my ear, "Join us." With a scream, I broke through the doors and stumbled into the stormy night. I never looked back, haunted by the thought of those frozen souls forever trapped in the supermarket's icy grip.